Hey there, everyone. I appreciate you giving me some of your time today. I hope you are all well and playing safe as always. So real quick before I start, I'm doing a little bit more instructional type videos here lately, and I just need to go ahead and say that the stuff that you hear me talk about and you see me do is up to your understanding. There is no one size fits all. It is no different than any of the many toys that you can buy that are industry related. It is your responsibility for what you do with it. This is for entertainment purposes only, if you will. I felt somebody advised that I throw it out there. Anyway, we started talking about yesterday about working on spikes. We do not use spikes for pruning. Did I start off on spikes and pruning from where I come from? Yes. Was I taught wrong? Yes. Should you ever do it? Absolutely not. We were talking about spiking for removal's sake. A lot of guys are talking about doing removals spikeless. Unless you're not having to chunk down the pole or you're leaving a lot of nubs, which is a safety issue that we can't really, I don't have time to go into, on top of the fact that it can create a lot of work. I actually did a video several months back on that very issue. Dig back and look at it. But for the sake of the gear that I use, all gear is basic gear. You have a harness, you have spikes, you have a flip line, you have a safety line, lifeline. Past that, there's a multitude of different things that you can add in to your advantage, some of which I'll talk about. Sometimes maybe doubling up flip lines. There's a lot of different things that you can use. But when we first start working with spikes, you don't have to leave very high off the ground, okay? In order to really start getting your feel for the spikes. Now, when I first started climbing, you know, most trees that you can actually grab a hold to, well, this is pretty much how we climb. Now, you'll notice that my body is set back at an angle here. Go ahead and throw this steel core flip line on. Yes, I almost always use a steel core flip line when doing removals, unless it's a broad canopy, and then I'll use my rope flip line until I get down to the chunking down part, and then I'll put my steel core flip line on. You have to trust your gear. You absolutely have to trust your gear, okay? Because if you don't trust your gear, you can't safely, securely operate with a chainsaw. Now, an individual that talks about trying to chunk down without spikes on, I really don't understand how you can do that securely without leaving a whole bunch of stubs, like I said before. But even if you do leave those stubs, what if you need to move all of a sudden? You don't really have but so many options to get out of the way. Whereas with these spikes, they give you the ability to move in any direction. Now you'll notice I'm looking down at my feet when I'm doing that spin. That's one of the most times that I'm looking down where my spikes are going. Is when I'm swinging around the tree or whenever I'm coming down. If you watched yesterday, I was talking about going up like a ladder. I'm looking at where I'm going. When I'm coming down, I'm looking at where I'm going. But having to trust your gear. I trust that steel core flip line. They're cheap enough. I change them out once a year. I do not keep a flip line more than a year in service. Even if it looks still good, I don't. I get rid of it. They're cheap enough. But going back, I 100% trust my gear. I don't have to hold on to the tree. Even if I got the saw here in my hand, I can change my angle for any moment for whatever purpose. If you don't have these spikes on and you're working on an X-current tree, and most all trees start off as an X-current tree, and then some become D-current where they become big broad trees, you know, you're gonna need these spikes if you gotta chunk it all the way down. Because this idea of having a whole bunch of stuff tied right here, especially if you don't have another tree that's taller than you, I've been in a whole lot of situations throughout the years where it was just one tree leaning over the house and there's nothing around it to work from, you know, to get a higher tie advantage. And so you're pretty much stuck working with what you have right in front of you. And if it's got a real hard lean to it, that can mean for a rather tricky day, especially without spikes when you're working down the branches. Now, if we are working our way up, we always want to have ourselves secured to a lifeline. Now, a lot of people have different setups. You can use a multitude of systems. I've got the hitch climbing setup going on here with the pulley and an eye-to-eye. Now, notice how I've got it up there in front of me. Well, this way, as I go up, I got that right there. So I don't have to, every time I go to advance my flip line, I can relax on that. And I don't have to work as hard to advance it. But I'm on that negative side. If you watched yesterday, I talked about working negative side to positive side. There's only one time that I go to the negative side when I'm working down a tree. And it's when I'm chunking down. And I'll tell you for why. Because when you're chunking down and you've got a pole that's leaning really hard, when you're on the positive side, you're trying to keep your balance. Because gravity wants you to go from one side to the other. Now, when you're rigging down, you want to be on the positive side because, well, all your limbs are naturally going to be on that side. You don't want your body and your rope and all that stuff on that negative side of the tree when you're rigging down. No, you want to maintain to the positive side. However, when it comes time to chunk down, if you're not rigging it down, what are a lot of us doing? We're making our break cut, our step cut, we're snapping it off and needing to control it. Now, if you're way up in the air on a little itty-bitty stem and it's got a real funky lean, you're going to have a real hard time keeping your balance, managing that chainsaw, managing that piece of wood. Stop fighting gravity. When you get to the chunking down point, come to the negative side. I've worked trees that were laying almost horizontal to where I was laid way back like this, you know, but understanding that I'm just letting myself hang at that point. But you don't want to stay here all day because it's a lot of pressure against your hips, especially if you don't have a higher tie-in point. A lot of times when you're trying to make those cuts, your flip line is going to be down here. And so if it's hard enough lean, you're really pushing up and exerting a lot of pressure against. But you ultimately don't have a whole lot of choice when it comes to that chunking down aspect. Not if you don't want to worry about once you've made your cut, you're ready to break your piece off and just have to control it and not have to worry about losing your balance because you have already fallen to the lowest point of gravity. All things will follow the path of least resistance. Your weight is no different underneath this flip line. So, but understanding, getting comfortable on this thing and getting that right angle of body. Because look, way out here, I don't want to work like this. I don't run the chainsaw like this from the ground. But at the same time, you know, I've watched a lot of guys, they're so close to the tree and they're hugging the tree and they can't relax. And you notice how my body's almost straight up and my spikes are actually getting more straight up and down instead of being back at this angle back here where I need to be at. Now even that right there is still a little far for work positioning, but depends upon what I'm doing. If I'm topping and really working with something, I want to be up close and personal. I don't want to be so tight that I'm, you know, up against the tree and I can't relax back into my belt. But I want to be close enough to where I have control over that chainsaw. My arms have got a nice little bend in them. You know, it's kind of the same way on the ground. You're not running a chainsaw out in front of you like this. Most people that are holding the chainsaw out in front of them like this are scared of it. They're scared of something. You got to trust your gear. You got to trust what your knowing of what you're doing to the wood is. But you got to be close enough to where you can actually work with it. You don't want to be so close that you're having a hard time keeping your spikes in, because if you are getting up, there again, you get so close to the tree that your spikes are almost straight up and down. You can't have that. You've got to be off of it just a bit to where you have that angle back towards the tree in front of you. Okay? But spend some time at ground level. All right? And remember, you guys that are macho and you think you're really pulling something off by doing removals without spikes, I do the canopy without spikes, but when it comes to chunking down, I like the stability. I like those points of contact that I know are not going nowhere. I do not do this for pruning's sake. Yes, this tree is coming down. The whole point here is helping you understand that getting comfortable on the spikes is, you find it down here. As with everything, you don't have to be way up in the air. Another quick thing, when you do get way up top, a lot of guys are talking about different crisscrosses of, you know, you can do a figure 8 with your flip line around the tree for added stability. You're going around one way, coming back and crisscross and making a figure 8 system. That works a good bit. Another thing I like to do, especially when I get up to the really, really small stuff, is I keep these loop runners on hand with these steel carabiner snaps on them. And I'll hook myself into that, and that doesn't move around the tree. And that way it keeps me centered at one point. And they come in a variety of different lengths, so as the smaller it gets, you know, I use a smaller strap. I usually keep about 4 of those at various lengths on me at all times. Just for, and this is not for life support. This is just for stability's sake. This is my life support. This is my life support. Even if I'm chunking down and I got my lifeline around the tree right here, I'm always going to be double secured whenever I'm chunking down. And me personally, I'm going to use a steel core flip line. When I'm running a bigger chainsaw and I'm working on bigger wood, yeah, it flips easier for me, and that's me personally. I use a 2-way adjuster. Why do I use this 2-way adjuster? This is not for everyone. You can use a rope system. This is actually a mechanical one. But when we say get up here to this next limb up here, now I used to spend a lot of time transitioning over limbs being unsecured. Which I can get here, pull myself in, disconnect this side, throw it over. I don't like being disconnected. I don't like it at all. So a lot of times I'll just let this end hang, and this isn't a bit long, and I have several different length flip lines for a various amount of different sizes. But go over top of that limb, hook in, then I'll disconnect that one and come back over. And that way I'm always connected on that flip line. Or take a secondary, run it off your bridge. There's a lot of different ways you can set this up, but it's understanding the moving parts and the capacity of your system. All of these fancy toys are all just an addition to the most basic system that you can put together. But having this lifeline in place is an essential. You have to have it. You just do. It enables you to do too many things that you can't do without it. Now, right now, I've got it up in front of me just because for a sense sake. Once I get up to my point of working, I don't have to have it that long anymore. I've just got a little eye-to-eye run off the end of that carabiner there. And now, I'm here. But at the same time, even with that, trying to get this footing without spikes and trying to do a removal, you just don't have that good, solid, firm right there where you just need to be secured in order to handle that chainsaw securely. Not in my personal opinion. Is it doable? Yes. Would I recommend doing removals, especially bringing down spars like this without spikes, without a secondary tie-in off of another tree higher up? Even with it, because ultimately you're going to be leaving nubs everywhere. You belly into one of those nubs and crack a rib. I've done it. Belly into a nub that's small enough and it impales you. Your limbs are catching up on them as you're trying to rig them down, causing more work. I mean, that list goes on and on. So, but essentially, you have to find your comfort zone on this flip line. You have to get comfortable and trust your gear. You have to trust it enough to really just get around it. Obviously, make sure that, that takes time. Getting to that point. And this is uncomfortable for about 3 months, give or take. Good quality spikes that do not have a whole lot of moving parts. Little friction as possible. Right adjustment is everything. Sharp spikes is everything. But being able to do this, to transition from one side of the tree in a hurry, to get over to the other side of the tree in a hurry. If you're trying to do a removal down a spar like this, and you don't have spikes on, you're not moving out of the way that fast. Not unless you have left all kinds of little things all over the place for you to ultimately get yourself hurt on. And yes, you will on a long enough timeline. Because that moment's going to come where your ground man's not going to rig it right, and you're going to need to get out of the way. Something's going to come up where you're going to need to move, and you're going to need to have that footing, and you're not going to have it. I don't know. Take from that what you will. There was a lot of interest in the whole thing about spiking after I did yesterday's video, so I figured I'd spend a little bit more time talking about it today. Hope that helps some of you. And but remember, please, what you do with this is up to you. I can't be responsible for your understanding of what it is that I'm explaining. There are so many. This is not one size fits all. I do not always leave the ground the same way because I'm never doing the same tree any 2 days. Some days it's a great big tree. Some days it's a little bitty tree. Every day is different. All right? I appreciate you guys. Y'all stay safe with this. I'll talk to you later.